ask you guys just to say and spell your name so I can have it on tape for 50 years from now?
Victor, you're up.
Oh, I'm Victor Beard from LaBelle.
And will you spell it for me, please?
Beer or LaBelle? Beer, B-E-E-R.
Got it.
I'm Ron Hamel with Gulf Citrus, and that's Ron, R-O-N-H-A-M-E-L.
Very good. All right. Whenever you're ready,
We're
John.
going. Gentlemen, thank you.
Do you want to talk to, how do we want to look? Like looking at John?
Yes, you can. It can be conversational.
Okay.
Gentlemen, Florida Citrus Hall of Fame has one of our missions is to tell the story of the Florida citrus industry. And our goal today is to talk about the evolution and expansion of Southwest Florida. And so we want to kind of get a flavor, talk about how things have developed and your experiences along that line. And so I think the first thing, Victor, tell us how long you've been involved in growing citrus in this area, and how'd you get started in the citrus business and so forth?
Well, in 1965, my father-in-law, Fred Goodwine in Francisville, Indiana, he purchased, I think, about 500 acres of grove down here, new grove. And since my landscape business was at a low ebb, they'd asked me to come down and manage it for them. Well, I came down with my 5 kids, my wife and I, in '65, and we settled ourselves in LaBelle, and we went out to take care of 500 acres of grove. Found out it wasn't planted, so it was nothing but blow sand, roads impassable except for 4-wheel drive. It had some bedding done, single row beds there, so we had to at once start planting trees. The wrong way. We were putting the trees in the hole, putting sand on, and then water. Found out 40 years later you put the tree in with water and then sand. But anyway, we started planting trees, and as we acquired the ground, they kept clearing ahead of us. We extended this grove into the 500 acres finally. But it was 3-4 years before we had anything to sell.
Now, we talked earlier with some folks, and they pointed out that a lot of the land down here had already been cleared by the vegetable people that came in and cleared pasture and planted vegetables. Now, did you inherit land that had already been cleared, or was this land that you had to do all the clearing yourself?
Oh, they were clearing ahead of us. Some of the land had been farmed. Tomato farmers were still just getting out, but most of it was new. Woods they had planted. They cleared the woods and bedded single row beds, and 1,500-foot rows, which seemed like an awful big thing to me. 1,500-foot rows that people had to walk on sometimes. So we got started planting, and it was probably it must have been the 7th or 8th year before we really sold any fruit, and that was about the first big sale I remember we had to Hugh English when he was buying for citrus. He was buying for duties. Duties were just new with their concentrate plant here then. And so I committed 200,000 boxes of fruit to Hugh and to Dudas, and so we were both feeling pretty good about it. But this was kind of the big part of the biggest sale we had. We finally did get up to 1 million boxes in a couple of years in our growth and the part we had to take care of. But Dudas had a big part in our operation, which helped us greatly to get us going. Always thankful for that.
Now, tell me, where did you? We'll start at the very beginning. Ron will come to you. Don't worry. But when you got started, where were you buying trees? Where did the trees come from?
We had somehow or other got started with Lane Blanton, and he used to bring us a load of trees every other day. He was there at 7 in the morning, and with a load of trees, and he'd dump them out on the road. We'd water them and let them sit there. till as we used them through the day. But Lane Blanton provided most of the trees back in those days.
And that's in Tavares.
Yes.
Hilltop Nursery.
Yes.
And they would dig those trees in the afternoon and wet them down. And I think Mr. Blanton Lane was actually delivering the trees himself.
He
wasn't
did. He did.
So,
Yeah. His son Chris would come down once in a while, but Lane was the one that was really doing the delivering.
well, I knew Chris and his mom and dad. His mom was far more colorful than Lane was, but they grew a lot of trees up there. A lot of trees were grown in Lake County and hauled down here and planted.
Yeah, they were nice trees. They did a good job.
When you first started off, what was how'd you deal with water? I mean, where did you get your water from? Were you a well guy? Or did you get ditches in, and how did you evolve into?
Water was the big nightmare. We did get, we established a Gruber Grove Water Control District. So we could get water from Okeechobee through a series of canals over to our canals that Alico had already built. And we pumped the water from these canals up into the grove, and then off of these main canals we had tributaries going to the road, just about the road every 360 feet. And of course they were just wide enough to get the water in and could take it out until the water hyacinth came in, and then we really fought that. We tried to Rainbird for a while, but we couldn't seem to keep the hyacinths down to keep our ditches clean enough for water. We worked at it for a couple of years. Rainbirds, as everybody and other people were using also, were about the only way to go, we thought. So we had to use Rainbirds for a while. And
Now these were large volume guns that set up on the ditches and
Right.
pumped out of the ditches and watered a large area. Then you'd shut it down and move it to another location.
We had about 4 settings for a ditch for 1,500 feet. But they were a tool of the devil. To keep those ditches clean enough to get water up to them was a never-ending job. So that was probably the hardest part until we finally got into the drip system, microjets. That was when we finally overcame our real water problem.
It almost seems like down here, it's either feast or famine. You either have flooding or you're in a drought. You know, it's never in between.
That's right, and it gets pretty dry ones. Oh, well, our first trees, we watered with a water rig, with a boom on each side of the water tank, going out over the beds. Three downspouts on each side to the ditch. Well, we'd make a round like that, and then that was so inefficient. My father-in-law, he was smarter than that. He got us lined up with downspouts in parallel with the road. So we'd got 3 trees with each side of the tractor going down the road. Till we'd get up to the end of the road when all that loose sand would slow us down or stop us altogether. We'd have to either let our water out and go fill up the ditch again and come back. It was one way we did it. But we were rotting trees like that with the downspouts mostly. That was before our Rainbird problem.
So you evolved from Rainbirds and finally ended up with micro sprinklers, which were a lot more easy to manage and more efficient.
That's what we're still doing today, yes. Yeah, it still works.
Now, what was your early planning as far as rows per bed and water furrows and ditching and everything else?
Well, our trees are about 15 to 27, 27 foot wide rows, 15 in the row, and we had 13 rows to a bed. The developer sold them in 40-acre tracts, 3 beds to a tract, and of course the 13 rows gives you a complete round. You end up back at the beginning if you can back. So the layout, we had swales in these beds also, which was supposed to get the water crosswise. But they were always tended to get covered up too. So we had to keep those clean as well as try to keep the ditches clean.
So you're having 13 rows between ditches, but then you would have a swell between each one of those.
The swales were crossing those ditches. 3 swales were 1,500 feet crossing those beds into the ditches that we get our water out of if we were rainbirding.
Sounds like it was fun.
It was hilarious.
Talk a little bit about some of the folks that were down here. Who was your go-to person when you had a problem, and what, you know?
Well, we had some pretty good advisors by our fertilizer salesmen. They helped us out tremendously, even getting our machinery calibrated. And Dallas Townsend's the man who helped us quite a bit. I'm thinking way back, I can't even remember the names of those first county agents, but they were very helpful.
Don Landers was down here.
Don Landers was one, yes, and there's several. But you know, we really got a lot of help out of our suppliers, our fertilizer salesmen and insecticide salesmen. They'd help us with calibrator sprayers and herbiciders, the herbicide, which was always a problem, keeping the weeds down. And then we had help from our machinery salesman in Fort Myers. So people were pretty helpful, all in all. There was people always we could go to.
I understand early on that one of your big problems was torpedo grass, pre-herbicides. It must have been a challenge to keep the weeds down.
Well, they were all pretty bad, but nothing as bad as the Johnson grass we got now. It's a killer. But the weeds are always a problem, always a problem. And we, in the early days, had people hoeing around the trees, but we tried to get it by herbicide, but it was always a problem.
Where did you get your help from? This was another issue. Where was the labor market here?
There were a lot of laborers living in LaBelle. They mostly, and Immokalee had a few of our helpers. I picked up about 4 or 5 every morning that I went to work the first couple of years, and take them home every evening. Just a few of them had their own vehicles, but we had some good help, some good workers. Some of them, and, you know, there's always some that we had problems with. We got along pretty well. There was seemingly a pretty good amount of help, labor available.
Now you said did you market all your fruit through Duda with?
Well, for several years, yes, we marketed. Well, I think we marketed most of it through Duda's. Then there were buyers from Winter Haven too. Ben Hill Griffins. We sold a lot of fruit to Ben Hill Griffin in those days, and they were very helpful in helping us market and with details. Very helpful.
Now, were there processors? Did a processing plant in the area? Did Duda had a processing plant? And who else? Was there another processing plant?
Barry.
Jack Berry had a processing plant down here.
Well, Jack Berry did some, yes, he did some processing. But Ben Hill, somehow or other, we got associated with them early on. So we had sold a lot of fruit to Ben Hill and hauled it up to Winter Haven. Frostproof, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, as things evolved, the growers decided that they needed to have someone to help them in marketing their fruit, Ron. And tell me a little bit about how Gulf Growers came into existence and how you became a spokesman for the growers down here, and what kind of a challenge it's been for you.
Well, first of all, you know, the industry started to really evolve after the series of freezes up in the central part of the state. And I had heard, at the time I was working with the National Dairy Board up in Washington, and I had heard that the industry in Southwest Florida was wanting to expand and also look at forming a association to go out and promote the region and promote the fruit, at the time pretty much the grapefruit that was being grown here, and start building identity for that product. So at that time I was actually looking to come back to Florida. I had been up in Washington about 3.5 years, and some folks contacted me and said, if you're serious about coming back to Florida, there's a group of growers that are forming an association, and they're looking for someone to come in and get the program together. And I got a call from, I believe at the time it was Haines City was involved in trying to get fresh fruit out of here. And Ben Abbott, I believe at the time, was the executive director of Haines City. And but he was helping the growers down here recruit to bring somebody on board to get the association off the ground. So I followed up, and Ben told me, well, the person to contact is a person by the name of Chet Townsend, because Chet was working for Turner Foods, and he was involved with Hugh English and George Austin and Wayne Jackson and a lot of the growers that were down here that were actively engaged in putting the association together. So I talked to Chet Townsend, and Chet said, well, he said, I'd be happy to interview you if you're serious about wanting to take the job. So I actually came down here on an Easter break. I was familiar with Southwest Florida, a beautiful part of the state. And so at the time I set up an interview, and if I'm not mistaken, around that table was Hugh English and Wayne Jackson and Chops Hancock and Al Curry and Chet Townsend. And I don't believe at the time George was with that, on that committee. And they interviewed me pretty intensely for, I'd say, probably a good 2 or 3 hours. And I was a PR marketing person. I wasn't a government affairs person at the time. I was more conditioned to promoting the dairy industry and selling milk and dairy products, but they were looking for a marketing person. And so we hit it off really well on the interview, and it was an exciting challenge to come down to this region and work with the growers to start something from scratch. But that's kind of how that started. At the time, I believe we couldn't get permits fast enough to get citrus in. The growers were wanting to plant a lot of citrus in this region. There was plenty of land to do that, and at the time a lot of incentive to do so, particularly following some of the freezes that had hit up in the Central Florida's traditional citrus belt. So a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of interest in trying to put something together.
Well, you kind of evolved from the originally intent to be someone to help them market their crop to an organization now that is an advocate for the industry, and you're not all that demanding from the marketing standpoint, but you're more of what is Gulf Growers doing for growers now?
Well, we've kind of evolved, you know, the marketing part, particularly after canker hit. You know, the industry changed quite a bit from the fresh side, particularly of the grapefruit side, when a lot of acres of grapefruit were pushed out because of the canker. And but even a little prior to that, we had a lot of issues related to water management. Water is a big issue for our industry. Taxes, you know, there's fewer residents in these rural areas, and you've always got to look over your shoulder at the property appraisers and the valuations of agricultural land, and in our particular case, the citrus land. So right off the bat, we started to have issues with water management. We started having issues with taxes. We also started having land use issues on what agriculturists could do with the land in addition to farming that land. And we've had, you know, a lot of our operations are near coastal areas, so we've had a lot of growth issues to deal with. So we kind of got more involved in a lot of issues having to deal with government affairs and community affairs and public relations and these kinds of things to assist our industry to communicate better with the rapidly urbanizing Southwest Florida area. So we've kind of evolved to a more diverse, I think, association than what was initially thought of as coming in and building an identity for the good quality fruit that was grown in this part of the state.
Well, water management districts have evolved, I guess, since the 70s. But in your experience, have the regulators been a hindrance or a help, or how have you handled the water management district? As Victor said, water was a key issue, whether you either didn't have enough or you had too much, and so here's an agency is going to tell you how to use water, and my guess would be that most of the kids in the agency had no concept of what farming was all about, and so you had to worry about people telling you how to do your business that had no idea how your business was being operated.
Well, you know, we're very fortunate to have a lot of talented growers and agriculturalists in this region, as well as IFAS and county agents and people. So when we started to get more involved in water management issues, we kind of structured a committee on our own, a government affairs and water management committees, and we start to interface better with the personnel at the water management district, educating them on what we need, how much water we need, also bringing in the various resources that we had available to us from the scientific perspective to take a look at these issues, and particularly dealing with water management and the availability of water in the dry season here. As Victor has indicated, you know, it was real important to make sure that we had in our permits enough water allocated to us to get through these more difficult dry times, winter months, at the same time when the urban irrigation was needed. So I guess we did a real good job of communicating the needs of ag, as well as working with the water district boards. We always had one or two ag representatives on the water district board, and we had good information to present to them, and that was really I think an important part. Not only that, but when they would start working on rules and some of these definitive things to look at conservation and look at water management, we were able to actually get in there hands-on and work with the staff so that we would end up not with all of the water we would like, but enough water that we could manage through it and at the same time do our part on the conservation side, but have adequate water that we needed in order to grow the crop. You know, it's a game changer, however, when we get into severe droughts where we had to face cutbacks and these kinds of things, and working through the 298 districts and the various other structures within water management, we were able to kind of survive a lot of these downturns because obviously, you know, one of the things we were blessed with is the transition from the Rainbirds and the overheads to the microjet. I think our area was one of the first really in the citrus area to adopt new conservation-minded irrigation practices in this area. We were kind of forced to get the permits, but yet in the long run it was a real benefit because it enabled us to get that water resource that we needed, particularly at the most critical times.
Well, Ron, you're involved in an organization that obviously communicates with folks out there, and I always thought it was fascinating that there are certain places where you know you could find the growers. Was area that I was in for a long time. There was Jack's Barbecue up on Highway 27 in Mineola. Growers were always gathered there. Where would you find these growers? Where did Victor used to hide in the morning for breakfast, or where could you track him down? Where did you all have a gathering place around here that people went to?
We had visits from these folks once in a while, that's about it. But we always had plenty of good communication with Ron and the group and our other growers. We had fellowship barbecues every once in a while, which give us a chance to change light up how that is.
Well, Florinellas was kind of the hub in the LaBelle area. Folks used to come to Florinellas on a regular basis, and you could capture, you know, just about anybody you needed to run down. If it wasn't with a phone, this was, of course, prior to cell phones and even bag phones and flip phones. I mean, we're talking phone booths and or, you know, a regular landline. But you know, the one thing that I found interesting in the communications process is that we had a good network of leaders. I mean, we had people that really wanted to come in and make a difference. And we structured the organization with a good board of directors. We had a small executive committee, but we also had individual specialized committees that would function on, let's say, government affairs, water management, or on the marketing side, or we had a tax committee. So we structured our group to address the issues. So depending on what was going on at the time, we could call a meeting and had pretty good participation. We had a pretty good combination of both senior level managers as well as some new younger folks coming on board, and I think it made for good progressive thinking, because I always thought the industry in this part of the state was quick to adopt technology and bring on new things, even in light of the fact that we did have a lot of senior level managers. They were pretty much open to doing things what I would consider were very progressive thinking and looking far enough in advance to address some of these issues. Because, you know, one of the in the transition period, one of the other issues other than water to come up was endangered species, because we have the Florida panther in this neck of the woods, and this was kind of home of the big endangered species cat that was a very important part of the landscape in this neck of the woods, and all the environmental groups were very concerned that every acre that could possibly be planted in citrus was going to be planted, and there would be no habitat left for the Florida panther. So we were able to get our government affairs group together with Dr. Arnold, who was running the center here, and IFAS, and probably do a landmark study on species and habitat and wildlife in this neck of the woods, which is still used by these agencies to point out that there's good wildlife habitat within the grove environment, both from the water and wetland perspective that's kind of interwoven in the landscape, as well as the protection the trees would provide. So, you know, the evolution of a lot of these things was very interesting, because we were facing real live issues at the time and finding real progressive solutions to dealing with them.
Yeah, I think Hugh Ings was talking about how that study was so critical in the fact that it gave you the kind of data that you needed to deal with the regulators, rather than, you know, like you said, the environmentalists would say you're going to wipe out the Florida panther, but you could come up with some data to say that in actuality, you know, 98% of the Florida panthers are on private land, and
Sure.
if it wasn't for the private landowner, you wouldn't have the kind of habitat and the environment for the panthers.
Well, you know, the other thing too that I think is an important part of the discussion, even though we're talking about citrus, a lot of the landowners in this part of the state are diversified in that they do have forestry, they do have row crops, they do have other parts of the operation, a lot of natural habitat there. So a lot of this is interwoven in the landscape, and it's you know, when you really start talking about these issues and how to address them, you know, it always goes back down to, yes, the private landowners are good stewards, and we can have relatively intense ag, but we can still have a good balance in the environment. And I think that's been a real plus for us in communicating with these regulatory groups as well as the general public, because we host tours for leadership classes and bring them out in the groves and show them, and it's a whole nother perspective when they actually see how farming and citrus is done versus what they think they hear on TV or through public hearings on water and wildlife issues.
Well, I know that the area has expanded. How, at one time, Ron, how large as Southwest Florida region and acreage wise and volume wise as far as its role in the industry?
Well, you know, we started out, of course, they've grown citrus here hundreds of years, but following those freezes up in the central Florida area and a little shift in production, Southwest Florida grew to nearly 200,000 acres at its peak, and this was prior to the canker coming in and rapid growth in the region and development, and then followed by greening. But at one time, I thought we were going to cross that 200,000 acre threshold as far as total citrus acreage, and of course, you know, canker took a big chunk out of that. I think we figured somewhere about 55,000 acres just mandatorily coming out with the 1,900-foot rule and those kinds of things, and we've had some pretty rapid growth in some of our more urban-oriented properties closer to the cities on the coast. So we lost a little acres there, and then of course this greening and a little of the economics built into trying to survive. Unfortunately, a lot of our smaller growers have kind of phased out, and now we do have probably more larger contiguous growing acreage than other parts of the state. But at our peak, we were close to 200,000 acres.
I want to just talk for a little bit about a little bit of the flavor of the people that were here. Some of the more colorful folks that you can remember and come into contact with.
Are you talking to me?
Either one of you. You know, when we talk, I think these are interesting. We talked earlier today, and Hugh English said that they had a guy that worked with a dude named Don Fox, and Don was kind of their technical guy. And of course, I knew Don Fox because he worked up in my area with a grower named Dr. Hoosman, Werner Hoosman. And so, you know, there's always a Werner Hoosman and a Don Fox and so forth. So, you know, these are some of the people that they kind of add a little bit of spice to life, and you always enjoy it when they come around, and they've always got a story to tell and those kind of things. Victor, who are some of the guys you remember that?
One advisor of ours named Gally Hackney stands out, who's telling us how he can calibrate our fertilizer spreaders so that we don't waste the ground. Fertilizer anywhere. Every granule counts. But beside Gally Hackney, we had a young county agent here when we first got her, who was very helpful. I can't remember his name, but he was one of several of these county agents who were really outstanding guys.
Charlie Matthews?
No, that doesn't sound familiar.
Clayton Hutchinson wasn't here. He was in Arcadia.
Yeah.
Clayton was here for a while.
Okay.
Yes, he was working in this area. There's just a number of other outstanding people. I'm lost to think of their names right now. Some of the characters, of course, were these people who had never really worked on a farm, that came from Immokalee, that they were more wildlife men that lived off the land, and to work regularly in the grove was a little out of their ordinary. But we had some very colorful people working even the women that worked in the grove. People that just was getting an education, working for someone else in something regular, 7 to 5. These were people that had never done that, just lived off the land. They were very interesting people.
Hard to get them civilized. Huh?
It was something like that, yeah.
I can think of 2 or 3 people that interface with. First, Chet Townsend was a really knowledgeable young guy. When I was kind of befriended Chet because he interviewed me for the job, and had to kind of wheel and deal to get me down here a little bit. But Chet was very knowledgeable about the rootstocks and the scions and the whole 9 yards, and he was trying to convert me from being a milkman to a citrus guy. So, I'm a part forestry major from the University of Florida, so I kind of knew a little bit about trees, but not about citrus trees. So Chet was very helpful, and we'd ride for hours, and he would point out this variety and this rootstock and this and why they were planted here, and give me some details. And Hugh English, of course, was very helpful in that regard too. When I'd ride with Mr. Hugh around the groves, and we had players like at the time Al Curry, who was a big in the tomato business, and he was getting in the citrus business, and they built a little packing house over in Felda. So he hired a guy named Ed McKenzie, who was a fresh fruit guy, I guess from Central Florida somewhere. I think his roots were. And at the time, we were trying to develop marketing and quality and ways of describing the Gulf fruit that was grown here, so we could compete in the marketplace. So that whole experience with Al Curry and McKenzie and Hugh and Chet, and of course you got to throw Wayne Jackson in there. Wayne Jackson was kind of our landlord at one time, as well as one of the founders. And of course, Wayne had somewhat of a reputation of being gloom and doom in a way. They used to kind of kid him as Gloom and Doom Jackson. And Wayne was always bringing up some complicated issue that he felt was going to take the industry down, and this kind of thing, or something to watch out for. So, talking to Wayne and kind of getting his perspective, and then at the same time trying to figure out, well, who can I go talk to that had a little more positive approach to dealing with this issue?
Yeah, not always a half glass empty.
Not the glass is half empty approach with Jackson. And of course that was like George Austin, because George always had a very positive outlook, and George was a boater and I was a sailboater, so we had the water and all these kinds of things in common. So it was a lot of fun to work with that crew of Wayne Jackson, George Austin, and Hugh. And of course we had folks like Victor, who was very supportive of there, and we had characters like Chops Hancock, I think, who everybody down here
I can tell you some
remembers
Chop stories.
Chops Hancock and him trying to get gung-ho in the fresh deal, and of course Duda had Jim Marshall, who was quite a character himself, that was kind of spearheading part of the citrus bell plant. And I can never forget, some of the early, probably within the first month when I moved here, everybody wanted to know why I was moving to LaBelle to take this job when I have a great gushy job up in Washington, well paid with the dairy industry, why I decided to leave there and come down to LaBelle and start working with the industry that basically was just starting out. And there was a lot of questions as to what my intent really was to come down here in the middle of nowhere after leaving a big city. And so between Chops Hancock and Jim Marshall and some of these others kind of questioning that, it was like I really wanted a new challenge and a new career. To start something from scratch was a real interesting challenge at the time in my life. So, but yeah, trying to talk to those guys and tell them the truth of why I came down to start the association, and it's been fun. It really has, and the challenges have not slowed down or haven't stopped. They've been different, and I think my first couple of weeks, people say about the industry, you know, there's no two seasons alike, and that's been probably the most truthful thing that's ever come out that's been said, because I don't think I've ever experienced two seasons since I've been here that have been alike. So a lot of wisdom and a lot of fun in the region over the years.
Well, you've kind of been, both of y'all have been involved, and you've seen this little child evolve and grow and develop. It's got to be a little disconcerting to see HLB and greening and that's taken over. And what's the situation with your property now? Are you a casual observer? Are you still involved? And what's going on?
I still control Little Grove. My sons Bruce Beer and Brian Beer there. They have been doing the work really, but this HLB has caused our production to drop so much. We were in the harvesting business. Bruce, my old son, he was running that, but that has diminished so much that we've done away with that. And we're just trying to enhance what we had left with the citrus business. I've got two great grandsons also working with us, little Brian and Brent, and we've tried to keep a family operation going. That's been my interest all along. And in the 50 years we've been here now, it's worked so smoothly. I just hate to see it diminish, which is it's slowly going down with this HLB. But we're hoping that there's going to be enough research come through to buoy up the business again, to help us control canker and HLB and get us back in production again.
Let me switch tapes real quick before you.
Get some good subjects.
Are we still, we're going? Okay.
You want me to comment on that, or what? I mean,
Yeah, I think, you know,
or do you want Victor to?
well, you've seen what's happened. What's the attitude of growers? I mean, it would seem to me that it could be awful discouraging to have production drop, and you're to the point of, like Victor said, you know, getting out of the harvesting business. What attitude do you see out here, Ron? Where do you think?
Well, you know, I would say about 2 or 3 years ago, it seemed to be at the lowest. I think when this greening hit, obviously we were the first area, just like we were to get canker, we were the first area to get greening, really, where it's identified and, you know, it's reality here. And we kind of got a little bit of a jump start on trying to deal with it as an issue kind of on a regional basis. And but I think it kind of the most negative that I had seen, I think a cross section of the industry, was probably about 2 or 3 years ago, when we really didn't have we weren't getting the research funding that we've been picking up here in the past few years. The science was just trying to give us some kind of answers to deal with it in the short term. But I think in the past year or so, I see that, well, the other part of that is we learned right on, and we were fortunate that we do have larger contiguous groves, that we were able to get in there and start our citrus health management areas, our CHIMAs, straight up with Dr. Stansley, entomologist, really pinpointing the fact that if we could get in there and spray coordinated sprays and hit these insects at certain times. So as we started learning these things and working together, I think that the level of the downside has kind of been shifting a little bit more positive. Now, that's not across the board. There are certain areas where obviously this disease is just almost insurmountable, but we do have the benefit now of being able to implement a lot more of the science and things that we're finding. And of course, the research center here was somewhat pivotal in doing some of the research on some of the nutritionals and soil management and water management and some of these things that we have reason to be more optimistic. And I know that lately we've been putting in more citrus, more trees are going in, a lot more replanting here than I think most other parts of the state. So I think the transition from that low level of negativity is starting to come up gradually. I don't know that we feel we're out of the woods per se, but I know that we feel that we can manage through this, and we're learning new things every day and put them to work.
Well, it's nice to see that construction going on here at the station. I understand that it was quite an effort to get this field lab established and everything else, but what kind of role has the research center here and the university played in the industry in the area?
I think it's been very important. We were fortunate to be able to attract some good scientists here. I know that the resources as IFAS and the university was facing a lot of cuts, that they had to reduce their support for the center here, but we were able to actually rally as an industry to get to the administration at IFAS to work to enhance this center because of its important role in the future of not only citrus but all of ag in this region. There's been a number of studies done that probably a lot of the more ag-friendly land, I guess you could say, or land for growing crops, citrus and others, in the state of Florida is located here in Southwest Florida. We have a lot of land. We're growing as a region, but we still have a lot of land available to grow crops in the winter months, which is very important to our country, food supply, particularly fresh fruits and vegetables. And looking forward, I think this center will continue to play a pivotal role and even expand its role in trying to enable agriculturalists to stay in business and be more productive over time. And I think we're seeing that the university and the leadership in the state are willing to invest in this center and in agriculture in the region. So that's very positive, and we're fortunate.
Well, I'm highly biased, but I think that we learned a lesson with canker that we're far better off trying to research our way out of a problem rather than regulate our way out of a problem. So let's hope that the scientists can come through, give enough financial support and encouragement. We're going to find an answer out there.
Well, we're really thankful for this center here. This center here means a great deal to our citrus industry. We're just really thankful for this place here.
Anything else comes to mind that you'd like to pass on? I always enjoy talking to growers. It's such an experience, and I tell a little story about going to a career day class one time, and I always ask the kids, these are about 6th graders, so what's agriculture? Most all of them would say,
All that bunch, Hal Curry.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I remember when Chops was wanting to send all that special fruit to Russia.
Yeah.
Well, I got a picture of him with this is when they had those international
Is that
guys.
George right?
No,
Who's
this is the guy
Who's
that,
this?
which guy, Danny Dude?
No,
No, he's the guy that managed Duda's packing
because
house.
I did try to deal with over-county stuff.
Whatever happened to
And
Charles?
it's
Jim
just
McLaughlin.
So this time it's.
That's who I was trying to remember. This guy is.
On Monday
Yeah,
morning.
he is.
And already on the end.
Because these are the guys that were cruising with the department. Remember, they used to have those tours, and at one time they only took them to the river. We made them as a sponsor all the time with Coca-Cola.
Oh, yeah.
Where'd John go?
Is this okay? Is that it for now?
Yeah,
All right.
thanks, Victor.
Anyway,
Appreciate
see you
it.
later.
Good to see you.